I like that too.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the inaugural episode of Brown Bag Bets, powered by BetSperts. Now, normally we would get into some quick chat, maybe even a little bit of repartee, but we wanted to take some time today to explain a little bit about the show, introduce ourselves. Again, Brown Bag Bets will be the name of the show. It'll be on at 11:30 Eastern every single Monday through Friday. You can watch us on YouTube. You can watch us on Periscope. We'll be adding a couple other video feeds, and Andy's going to talk about some of that stuff in just a second. But the goal here is to have a short daily show, about 20, maybe 30 minutes if we get to be a little long-winded. Just fire through some picks and I'll let you guys hear how we process these things, how we're building these picks, and just give you a little flavor of what we're doing each day. So I'm Alex. I'll be the host, and our co-host, Andy. How you doing, bud? Why don't you tell people a little more about the show?
I'm doing great. It's Monday. I'm figuring things out. The Bills really ruined my Sunday night, but we get to try again here on Monday nights, another football game. And so not only is this live on YouTube, and I know we do a lot of live stuff over at the Deep Dive on YouTube, and a lot of that is just, it's a halftime show. Like, it doesn't do you much good after halftime, especially if you're just there for the pick, or if you want to go watch some of the talking that we do back and forth in overtime, that's fine. But the fact that this is going to be live streamed on YouTube means that it'll be at YouTube immediately afterwards. You can watch it if you miss this, if you want to watch it later on. If your lunch is at a different time, maybe you're on the West Coast, you want to catch this later on, you can always go back and look at this on YouTube, watch it on the YouTube channel. Like I said before a couple times, we're making it super easy. It's just on the same YouTube channel as the Deep Dive podcast. So it'll just be one big happy family over there. And then, of course, anybody who can't listen to this, watch it live as a video, it will be probably within about a half hour. I don't think it's going to take me that long. I'm going to be able to get this up as a podcast basically anywhere. Look, I've made a banner for this. We're on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, everywhere you can get your podcast. So if it is something you miss early on in the day and you want to listen to it, a lot of times we're going to do our best to not say like, hey, I made a bet on a game and it starts 30 seconds after this broadcast is over, during the broadcast. A lot of the stuff we're going to touch on is in the evening. Like, we're going to be talking a little bit about Monday Night Football tonight, and we're going to be talking about some basketball games tonight, and forward looking a little bit with Noops has some NBA looks, and obviously that's not starting quite yet. So anything you guys can do to help, a nice retweet would be good, because it is newer. It's not something that's out to all the masses yet. Even if you only have a few followers, a retweet would be great. A thumbs up on YouTube. And then once we do get some podcasts going over there on the podcast forums, wherever you get your podcast, giving it a rating review, that would be cool as well. And then, as always, just if you want to talk Noops about communicating with us.
Yeah, please reach out to us. As Andy said, we're going to be available just about anywhere. And this is a new show. This is something a little new for both of us. We're used to doing longer form programs. So we have some ideas, of course. We've got a lot of things we want to talk about every day. But reach out to us. Let us know what you want to hear. What's interesting for you? What do you like that we're doing? What would you like us to do that we're not doing? We'd love to hear your comments, your criticism. Heck, even just chat sports for a little bit. Both of our DMs are open. You can find me on Twitter at _Noops. You can find Andy on Twitter at AndyMSFW. And of course, there's the Brown Bag Bets account at Brown Bag Bets. DMs are open at all three. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you like and what you'd like to continue to see from us as we grow here. Any other thoughts, Andy, before we jump into some picks?
No, just I was thinking about that too. Some of these I get some pretty good DMs sometimes with some pretty good questions. And over on the Deep Dive, I don't get a lot of chance to answer all those because there's so many, it's an hour and 40 minutes long. We have to pump through all the games. We're out of buys now too. So it's even longer. And a lot of times I wish I had time to talk about some of those. So if you do have a good question, hit us in the DMs. It might be a segment, man, because that just makes my life even easier. You might just be doing the writing. You'd get producer credit, I suppose. I'd have to put you in the closing credits. But yeah, if you have a good question or even just a process question, a math question, that can be something we can cover on here too. This is a living, breathing thing. We're not 100% sure what we're all going to do with it. It might look a lot different here in a few weeks. So yeah, let's dive in.
So, as Andy mentioned, the NBA season is rapidly approaching. We've got about 9 days. Actually, I think we're down to 8 days until the season starts. And one of the things that I'll be doing on the show as we approach that is going through some futures and things. You can find a lot of my work again on Twitter. I've been doing some stuff for Ace NBA previews. But one of the things I've yet to talk about is one of these statistical category leaders. As books continue to open more and more markets, you can bet on things like who has the best points per game, rebounds per game, assists per game, steals. I haven't seen steals, but there's also a market for blocks, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. As you start to look into the market for blocks, the leader there is Hassan Whiteside at plus 225. He was the leader last year in blocks, but he is now a backup center for the Sacramento Kings. The next favorite is Rudy Gobert. He has only averaged more than 2.3 blocks once in his career. The leader in blocks with the NBA for the last 3 years has had at least 2.6 blocks. So we're looking for at least that number. Not feeling great about Rudy Gobert, especially as the second favorite. Anthony Davis, a guy who led the league in blocks a couple of years ago, but that was as a Pelican and now is playing further away from the basket. Hasn't been close to 2.5 blocks per game since he's moved to the Lakers. You look at some other names, Brook Lopez, Miles Turner are the next two. Brook Lopez was very impressive last year. I don't expect an aging center to continue to get better and start to see the same amount of blocks that he had last year. Miles Turner, another guy who led the league in blocks a couple of years ago, but has seen those numbers drop precipitously. Now, we've finally gotten to the guy that I like. Mitchell Robinson is plus 800 to lead the league in blocks. When we look last year, he was in the top 5, averaged 2 blocks per game and only about 20 minutes per game. The year before, 22.4 blocks per game at about 21 minutes. So really what we need here is him to play 30 minutes per game. And based on those numbers, we're looking at anywhere from 2.6 to even as much as 2.8 blocks per game. He should be the starter for the New York Knicks this year. I know a lot of people are talking about Nerlens Noel, but I think Tibbs is going to love what Mitchell does on the defensive end of the floor, his consistency night in, night out. And Thibodeau is the kind of coach that wants to run these players into the ground. So I think that if he does get a chance to be the starter here, we're going to be looking at 30 minutes pretty easily. And we're going to have somebody that I think is going to be averaging 2.5 to maybe even 2.8 blocks per game, who's definitely going to be a contender. So at plus 800, put a little bit on that. I love that. I think he should be a lot closer to the favorite in that market. What do you think, Andy?
I think you have a lot of pressure on this Mitchell Robinson blocks bet. This is the first ever bet we ever put out on this show. So like this will kind of set the tone. I think you were smart though to make sure it can't lose tonight, unless you find out like he tore his knee at practice or something horrible like that. So yeah, I guess I am forced to play this because it is the maiden bet here. And yeah, probably you kind of pulled a fast on me by going with a season win, or not a win total, but a future. Which, to be fair, it's not like we can bet an NBA game tonight.
I would love to. There's probably there's a couple preseason games on that I won't be touching. It's just not who I am as a person. But I thought it'd be fun to start with a little bit of a lottery ticket here.
Yeah, I know some people that are betting preseason NBA, but I will warn you guys, it's really tricky, and it's super similar to like the NFL stuff where you have to be ahead of the curve. You have to know who's going to play. Like you're going to find out like the 3 stars basically aren't playing. You kind of saw that. I don't know, that maybe the Nets Wizards game last night. Was that they Washington didn't really start many of their starters. It's not like the Nets blew them out because obviously the Snake and Kyrie didn't play big minutes, but it gets really tricky. So maybe stay away from the NBA preseason unless you got a super hot tip. And in that case, I mean, give it to me first. But college basketball, usually Mondays are kind of light. I did have one thing that popped in my model and the numbers started to kind of get away from me there anyway. So I ended up with a pretty small bet on a total. And this is not something I've ever done. And I know people were scared when Andy was betting favorites and getting away from things, but I have been working on a totals model and it's really, really in beta. So this is kind of a small bet for me, but I am going to be on the William and Mary over today. It's a little tricky getting into totals, just, lightly like this, but it is something I like. And William and Mary, they are the hottest 3-point shooting team in the country. They're number 1. They're tops in the league. They have only played 1 game. That's the part about it. I saw that one and I'm like, oh, that's goofy, but they did go 12 for 24 in their 1 game. It is something they can do. I'm sure that will regress. I doubt they'll shoot 50% for the year. If somebody shoots 50% for the year from deep, I would think we'll hear more about William and Mary, but they are kind of a lower level team, even in their their division. conference. Yeah, it is a conference. It's a goofy team that was, new coach last year. They relied on a big front court that kind of ended up, they lost a couple of those guys. It's going to be a weird how they have to adjust based on losing kind of a center that they relied on. They have a backup center / power forward that he came in, he went 4 or 5 from deep in the first game. So, not just the guards. They look to move to more guard play, getting more out of that backcourt this year. But if you can have, and he is the backup center power forward, but it's looking like he'll probably end up starting now based on what we're seeing from the rotations and just how much he ended up playing. They did play Old Dominion in their one game that was in November. It's been a while, so they will be rested. They let Old Dominion shoot 50% from the field, including 43% from deep. Their defense wasn't good last year. They were an okay team. They're actually a little bit of a surprising team, William & Mary. Their defense was still a liability, but it was masked by some of that good front court play. So GW's pace is up a ton. They're actually got what I have. Average possession length is 4 seconds less than last year, which is and I, again, I made a joke about how William & Mary was the number 1 3-point shooting team in the country because I had a sample size of 1 game. But George Washington has actually played a handful of games, and they're legitimately their pace is way up this year. So I am fine with this. It opened at 150. It dove all the way down to 147. I took over 147 plus 102 where I found it. You can still find that number plenty of places. There's a few 147.5. So it's my maiden total for the year, and hopefully it gets there at 7 o'clock tonight.
Your maiden brown bag bet. Now, you did mention that the totals dropped a little bit. Are you concerned about that? Do you have any idea why the market is looking at the under here early? I mean, obviously you're excited to get a better number than last night, but is there any concern or hesitation as you see that move?
I guess it was, I'm not sure on the move. Sometimes there's some head fakes. You do see totals moving a lot. Like some of these moves are like 10 points at times. And I guess it is a higher total for a team that we've only seen play one time. But at the same time, I'm fine with this just based on what I ran my numbers through. I did have to use a lot of my priors with William & Mary because, again, they've only played one game. But I think I have a pretty good feel for, what we have for George Washington as a team, and they're favored. It has come down. It opened George Washington -7. It's down to +5.5. So I think that William & Mary offense is getting a little respect, and I'm fine with this total at a better price.
Nice. Well, we'll jump on board there. For the third bet that we wanted to talk about, we're going to jump into football, but not Monday night yet. Looking ahead to next week, one of the best ways to attack the NFL is to look the week before. You have to jump on a lot of these numbers early. Of course, a lot of you guys are familiar with the deep dive and the show that they do Sunday night, looking at all the openers. It's a really great way to get ahead of the market. So looking towards next week, I'm a big fan of the Chicago Bears +3.5 against the Minnesota Vikings next week. Now, it is in Minnesota, but when I take a look at this game, I make the Vikings a 1.5, almost 2-point favorite. So I'm not only getting 3, I'm getting the 3.5. Really excited to get that hook. As you start to look at the matchup, we were joking about this a little bit in DMs yesterday, but I think having Mitchell Trubisky and his quarterback has helped the Bears. I think it gives them a little bit of consistency. I think the team knows more what's going to happen. It makes the offense a little more simple to run, I think, with him involved. It's just, I think, a lot easier for everybody on that team. It helps the run game. You've seen David Montgomery's numbers really jump the last 2 games, and I think that's definitely tied to Trubisky being on the field. So it just gives them a little more of an identity, and I think the team has just settled better. On top of that, this is a team that's familiar with Minnesota. Yes, they did lose the game earlier in the year, but that was with Nick Foles and I think even Tyler Bray throwing some passes at some point. So I'm going to throw that out a little bit. I don't give that too much credence, and I think maybe that's what's driving a little bit of the value we're seeing here on the Bears. Again, I think the Bears are ready for this game. Dalvin Cook is not going to have 200 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns against the Bears. They know what's coming. They're going to be ready for that, and they have the defensive weapons to stop it. They have a solid run defense. I think they're allowing just under 4 yards per carry, which is a pretty solid number this year. I think the pass defense is going to be adequate, even as Minnesota's trying to throw passes late. I like the Bears here. I think they're a live dog. So I was happy to get them at 3, even more thrilled to get them at 3.5. And if you jumped in last night, you were even lucky enough to get a 4. But like that 3, and if you 3.5, and actually if you have a +3 at like +102, +103, I've seen around, I don't mind that either. What do you think about the Bears next week?
Yeah, I talked about the Bears with a couple people over the weekend, just based on some of the play calling looked a little better. And everyone's like, "Oh, Trubisky's back, and he made it happen." No, the play calling was greatly improved, and they played against a bad defense. That helps. They're going to play against bad defenses for the next few weeks, and hopefully the Bears get to be overvalued, and we get to hammer the Packers in Week 17, and hopefully a game that matters to Green Bay. But the way it's looking, it's going to be a nice race for the 1 seed. So yeah, last night when we went through the openers, Drew and I both kind of agreed Chicago was probably a little too heavy of a dog here, and the points for value and maybe even the money line at a certain point, because Minnesota's defense is awful beat up at this point, and it's not a great matchup for an offense that has been playing better of late. So I don't hate that at all.
All right, let's jump into the Monday night game. Now, actually, Andy, do you have the lines pulled up? I'm sorry, I don't have the main market there. You know what? Here we go. Tonight, we've got the Ravens playing the Browns. Sorry for the little bit of second there of on-show prep work. The Ravens are 3-point favorites in Cleveland tonight. I'm seeing a total of 45.5. Both of those numbers look just about right to us. I think, if I had to pick something, I lean maybe Ravens and like an under or something. It's pretty windy tonight. I think we'll see a lot of running. Again, not a serious play for either one of us here, but we know people like those big markets. Andy, do you have a thought or a lean or some advice for the folks before we jump into some derivatives?
Yeah, I did make a play on this. It was I hate to even do this because I shouldn't even be saying this, but it was the secret podcast play on Wednesday. It was under 23 for a team total on the Browns, and that has been bet down. So nice job by anybody who bet that down. It's like 21.5. I think the under's the look here. When I did look at this, I went through a whole thing trying to find a prop for this, because there has been times where the Browns defense has played well against the run. They give up yardage, but I feel like it's been more of a problem versus the pass, especially with Denzel Ward continuing to miss time. So I'm like, God, maybe Lamar's a little depressed in the passing yards market. Maybe I can make a case for that. And then you look, it's 25-mile-an-hour winds, and it's Lamar. So I'm not interested, even though it's like under 200 yards for his passing. His best passing game this season was against the Browns in Week 1. And granted, it's a lot different now, but still, without Denzel Ward, I liked it a little. Some of the running back totals are a little depressed, and it is because they do move people around. They use all 3 running backs. I ended up landing on one here, and it was J.K. Dobbins rushing plus receiving. They have just every week, whoever the bell cow back is able to go over 50 yards at least. They've given up some big games. Obviously, last week was a much better running back, but we've seen Dobbins kind of move his way to the top of the depth chart here. His rushing attempts total this week is set to 11. He has been the bell cow in each of the last 2 weeks that he played. 2 weeks ago, half the team was missing. He didn't play because of the Rona game, but I just like I like him able to get to add in the receiving yards as well. He does lead all the running backs on the team in targets. Again, he didn't get any last week, which sucks. And obviously the week before, again, he was out. But he has 22 targets on the year, which leads all running backs. And just in my brains here, I was thinking, if you can't throw the ball deep because it's windy, and the run game is getting stymied a bit, you have some beat up offensive linemen, and they have been able to put a little bit against the run. I would think some swing passes, some screen passes, something like that would be okay. I almost played him over 1.5 receptions. That felt a little dicey, seeing how I think 3 targets for maybe 4 might have been the most he ever got in a game. So, yeah, I'm fine with this. His rushing has been 70, 75 yards or so. If he gets this amount of carries, I think he might get this without getting a target the whole game. And as far as game script goes, I just don't see Cleveland getting a big lead. I don't see him having the success through the air they did last week versus a bad secondary. This is not the Tennessee secondary. This is a secondary with actual pieces, actual players. So if we don't get to a spot where Cleveland gets to a big lead and they're forced to throw a lot, I think you'll see Dobbins getting fed, especially if we get to the other game script and Baltimore gets up big. And we end up with, Dobbins looking nice, getting a bunch of carries late as they try to salt the game away. So, yeah, a little prop I played here. I was able to find 57.5 for rushing plus receiving at 15.
Yeah, I like that angle a lot. I like what you did there because we were talking earlier about this, and you were trying to find some way to attack the idea that you think there's not going to be a lot of throwing tonight, given the wind and kind of the gameplay. And I like what you did by combining the rushing and receiving there. I think that's a pretty low number for probably the most talented running back on the Ravens at this point. And like you said, you have two ways to get it. Maybe he does get a couple catches and a few runs to get you to 60, or like you said, he's just out there salting the game away, and you're looking at 60, 65 yards. I think that's a nice prop. All right, let's jump
Yeah,
into.
let's talk a little more Monday night because we are blessed. We have a game tonight. It gives us a little more free content because this is easy. Everybody loves this bet. Take us into it, Alex. Let's close with the banger.
All right, and Andy, maybe you can bring up that lovely graphic, folks. Hopefully, this goes
First
well.
touchdown score.
First touchdown score. It's one of the most fun bets in sports. Gives you a reason to really watch the game, especially during prime time. Now, tonight we have a few interesting choices. To take kind of a step back, it's an interesting market in that a lot of the top running backs and wide receivers end up being the big favorites here. Basically, any of the names that you're used to seeing on a fantasy football team, or you'd think of starting on a fantasy football team, are priced out of the market for the most part. So what I tend to find is a lot of your value is in quarterbacks and tight ends. That's what we have tonight. Now, Lamar Jackson, we all know he's a great runner, one of the most gifted runners, frankly, in the game of any player, let alone a quarterback. At 10-1, this is a great price. Be sure that you shop around. The prices here for these things are different from a wide range. I've seen Lamar Jackson this morning as low as plus 500, and I've seen him as actually there's a plus 1,100 floating around out there if you're lucky to have the one book that I saw. But plus 1,000 or 10-1 seem to be a pretty steady price that should be available for most of you guys. I think that's a great number. Again, he's usually in the 5 to 6, maybe even sometimes 7-1 range. So 10-1, I like his chances tonight. And then another player, Mark Andrews, again, the tight end for the Baltimore Ravens. And when I start to look at the tight ends, what I find is most of the times you'll see a player that is very high in targets in terms of the team. When I take a look at Mark Andrews, for example, he is second only to Marquise Brown in targets. Marquise has got 75. He's got 60. The next closest player is 40. They're players quarterbacks look for, and I think that they're really underpriced. As you start to, again, look at some of the other numbers, you've got guys like Marquise Brown is about the same price as Andrews. You've got guys like Willie Snead pretty close to Andrews in some places. So at 10-1, happy to add him as, again, he's somebody that Jackson's going to be looking for as they get closer to the end zone. When we get to the Cleveland Browns, similar strategy. You've got Austin Hooper. Again, I think he is second, if not third. He's second of the team in targets. And you see he has similar odds to Jarvis Landry to score a touchdown here. He has similar odds to Harrison Bryant, who's way down on that list. So really like Austin Hooper here at 18-1. And then Baker Mayfield. I don't understand why this is 50-1. This is a bad number. Usually it's in the 20 to 30s. Tonight, I guess maybe the market assumes that Baltimore is going to be a little more ready and not willing to let him run around and sneak in for a touchdown. But at 50-1, I love that. So took all four of those. In total, I think I have about 1.5 units split up over the group. If you want to DM me, I'm happy to share with you the math there and help you figure out what you can do to build a portfolio that's balanced. But those are the four names I have tonight, and hoping they score the first touchdown. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I like that, but definitely keep an eye on Hooper. I know he is questionable. There's a chance he may miss. I would, I guess, do some double checking on that. Or if you are going to play Hooper, maybe wait a little closer to game time, see if he is ruled in. I know he's had some neck injury, neck issues, but no, that's cool. Let's. I think we should do that every primetime game. Sucks we didn't start this sooner. We started week 15, or technically this is still the end of week 14. So we got more games to go, and there's playoff games. So first touchdown score
back on Thursday.
Still my favorite thing. It's still one of my, it's such a dumb bet, honestly. Maybe not. I think you can beat the market if you take the time and shop, but it's a silly bet that everybody loves, and I'm a big fan. I hit Goff. Somebody gave me Goff last time. It felt so good when they like go for it on fourth sneak. Like you're just dying when the wrong running back gets the carry there. Especially it's like fantasy, but that. So let's close on that and let's take her out for the day.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching. We really appreciate it. If you could, if you're on YouTube right now, look just below the screen there. Click that little thumbs up button. We'd really appreciate that. Subscribe to the YouTube channel to make sure that you get notifications every day when we're on. Again, this will be available for podcasts just about any and everywhere as soon as it's done. Like Andy mentioned, he's in charge of that. So make sure you DM and let him know if the podcast isn't up on whatever app that you're using so we can get that done. We would love a rating, a review, again, a subscription to there. All that stuff helps us. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Brown Bag Bets. And as we mentioned, our DMs are open and we'd love to hear what you have to say. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.